Hello, DK here, and today we're going to talk about drums. I know everybody's like, dude, you always do guitar amps and stuff. Why drums? Well, actually, I've been playing drums way longer than I have been a guitar guy. Anyway, these are some drums I'm refurbishing. They were purchased secondhand, and they're actually pretty good drums. We'll take a look at them, and we'll get them all tuned up and worked up. If you're new to drums or have never set up drums or never tuned drums or you just want to hear my opinions on that, stay tuned and we will get this drum kit good to go. Okay, so these are actually some pretty good drums that I'm setting up for somebody. And this is the floor tom, this is a 16. And the reason I say they're good drums, it doesn't even have to do with what kind of wood they're made of. The kind of wood they're made of is sort of irrelevant to them being a good drum. If you're new to drums, the wood is a big selling point, and it's about the pretty, but it's really not as much about the sound as they want to make you think it is. It's important to sound, but effectively what you want is you want a shell that's thick enough, that it's rigid enough, that I can't just, flex this easily by hand, and you want to count your number of lugs in a circle, because the more lugs you have in a circle when you go to put your rim on there, the more even the tension's going to be. That's what gives a good drum sound, even tension. So your drum, you don't want to have a cheap flimsy rim that you can just bend and flex, which this is not. This is not the best rim, but it's not a bad rim. So before you even start, take the heads off your drums, just take them all off, and polish all the dirt off of your drums and hardware. Chrome cleaner. Car store, good. Use chrome cleaner on all the chrome. And for the shells, I use car wax. Car wax works great. It's a cleaner wax, and you can actually use one of those nice low-speed car buffers on there. Makes your job a lot easier. So, anyway, I've already got the heads picked out for this. I'm going to pull a couple of drum heads off the shelf just to show you a few differences, but reality is drum heads aren't a huge deal, and we'll talk about them while I'm sitting here putting it all back together. Okay, so back in the old days, people played drum skins that were made of skins. They were actually old cowhide. Well, not old cowhide, but back in old days, if you still find one, it's probably old cowhide. But cowhide drum heads were the thing, calf skin, goat skin, whatever. And that was a real pain in the butt, and playing drums sucked. And then they introduced what they considered all-weather drum heads, which were made of plastic. Dun, dun, dun. I know, you guys are going, what? This is an Evans head from probably the early 60s. It's really old. And they didn't really know how to attach the rim, so they actually molded it together and really flat. There's kind of no ridge on this, but this is actually an old Evans head with a plastic hoop. It was the plastic drum head with the plastic hoop. 1960s advertising. How groovy is that? But obviously we've evolved from that a little bit, and we've moved on. Some manufacturers, like my favorite manufacturer of drum heads is Ludwig. I know, you're going, what, Ludwig? I like that they actually use a thin rim, and it's crimped. It's crimped in there, and the crimped rim, to me, holds the best shape, and it just interferes less. They tune up easier for me. That's personal preference. And this particular type is called a power collar. I don't know if you can see on the camera. There's kind of a thin rim of like a little film there. It's actually adhered in there. That's for overtone control. Basically all the different drum heads like Pinstripe and Power Stroke and all this kind of stuff. All of these different drum heads that are supposed to be, tone control, tone focusing, whatever, they're putting dampening around the rim. Here's a newer Evans head that's beat up, and again, it's just a ring of stuff around the rim to kill some of the vibration. Whatever. So today we're using Remo, because Remo. Not necessarily that I have anything special about Remo, but they're readily available. And these heads, the rim is epoxied in there. So whatever drum heads you prefer, it's no big deal. They're all pretty much plastic, and you can buy them in different thicknesses. So pick whatever drum head you like, because trying for me to discuss and argue with that with anybody is like watching truck fans argue between Chevrolet and Ford, and nobody ever wins, and it just goes on forever. So step one is just to set the drum head on the drum, and it should find kind of a happy center. It shouldn't want to, this one kind of wants to rock a little bit, so I got to make sure I get it flat. Sometimes in shipping they flex the rims, but there. Now we've got it flat. It's not popping up. It's not bubbling up on me. So it's flat, and then we'll set our rim on it and line the holes up pretty close. Before we actually start tightening, make sure there's no crap around your bearing edge. Make sure that's nice and smooth. If it's got a bunch of pit marks and pot marks in it and stuff, you're going to need to get that fixed if you expect it to actually work properly as a drum. So we want to make sure the head's on there evenly, and then we'll place our rim on there. And the rim should fit completely over the head with relative ease. And then we start putting our lugs in. Yay! Okay, so I mentioned earlier good drums versus bad drums, and that these are good drums. Well, why are these good drums? It's pretty much because these drums have enough lugs going around the shell. We basically just go around and count all of the lugs and rods on your drum, depending on the size. The more lugs and rods you have, the better drum it's going to be. It's very simple in that to get a good steady tone that's going to maintain good tune and good pitch, you need to have an even tension around the whole drum. And basically what we're doing now is I'm just making sure our rim is straight, and when I make sure it's straight, I'm just turning the rods snug with my fingers. And we're going to go around the whole drum and do this. We're not actually tightening it up yet. We're just going to put these on. So while we're talking about it, selecting whatever drum heads you want, drums are pretty much physics. You've got two strips of plastic or two sheets of plastic vibrating over a wood cylinder. That's not exactly rocket science. So physics basically says the heavier drum head is going to resonate longer and more. So if you buy a heavier drum head for a rock and roll sound, and then you're finding that the things are too loud and too boomy, well, first of all, you have to hit them harder to get them going because they're heavier. And the bottom head, if you're using a heavy bottom head, that thing's going to ring and ring and ring and ring, because it's easier to stop a tennis ball rolling across the table than it is a bowling ball stopping across the table. It's just physics. So a lighter weight head on the bottom is going to give you less sustain. All of this other edge control and all of this kind of stuff, a lot of it's marketing stuff, and use what you like. It's all a style thing. But there's so much marketing in these drum heads, and so much of this, it's just enough to make me go absolutely bananas. In this case today, we're going to be using a Remo Ambassador on the bottom, which is a medium bottom, and we're going to use a 2-ply coated top. A coated head is going to be a little bit mellower than a clear, and that's just a nice good starting point. So once we get those all turned down by hand, we'll just give a little press with our hand here, just a little press, and then we'll snug that up. And we want to kind of do everything opposite, so I do one then the other, like you would do lugs on your car. So make sure you get all of that snugged up. You can actually hear the crackling noise, and the crackling noise is the head actually starting to seat onto the shell. Yay. Okay, so we got that. Now that we've got it on there and got a little bit of tension on it, now we're going to go get our drum key and seat the head. Okay, so we'll just do a half turn on each of the lugs in the car lug nut style that we did before. And as you go, you're going to find that some of these feel easier than others, and it's normal. Just stick with a half a turn for the moment. That popping noise is normal, and if you're not used to the popping noise or it bothers you, you're going to hate what comes next. So effectively now we've got a little bit of tension on it. we're going to just give it a good CPR press. Now, this stand on the drum, jump on the drum, punch the drum, all that stuff is ridiculous. Just give it a good CPR press. You'll hear it make the creaky noises, and now we're basically ready to start tuning almost. But we're seated, we still have some tension. I'm going to flip it over and we're going to put the other drum head on. And I don't think we're going to film that because you don't need to watch me do the same thing over again. Okay, so I got both heads mounted on and CPR pressed. For the next step, you need a beach towel. It doesn't have to be a good beach towel, it just needs to be a beach towel. And the reason we say that is you need to lay it underneath your drum when you put it on there, so you're only hearing one half of the drum at a time because you're going to tune the bottom half and then the top half. Okay, so before we even start, we've already got some tension on the drum. So I want to put a finger, doesn't matter which finger, just a finger in the middle of the drum, and then don't put any pressure on it, but then just tap around the drum. Listen to the tones. So this to here is just a little bit lower than it is on the other ones. I don't know if you can hear that or not, so we're just going to give it just a little bit of a snug up here, and then we'll try it again. And give it just another stretch press. It actually dropped more. Go figure that one. Give that a little bit more. And why am I turning one more than the other? It's just a feel thing. Feeling how snug they feel. So we seek to get an even tone from all sides. And what's strange is even though I might be snugging it up here, the pitch over here is going to go up anyway. As I try to work the lowest lugs and bring them up a little bit to get everything even, everything's going to go up a little bit. So we're still a little lower across these two. Let's go a little more there. A little more there. Okay, so we're getting close. Come up a little bit over here. And still a little bit more over here. Give her one more press. Move our listen. Okay, the only low spot was right over here. So bring that up. So we're pretty close across the board. That's just peachy. At this point, give it one more good CPR press. The pitch is probably going to drop across the board. And then just kind of bring it up to tension a little bit to whatever you like. I generally try to find a nice, this is the biggest tom in the set, it's a 16. I try to find generally the lowest pitch it's really happy with. And it's might be a little bit higher than you think, but it sounds a lot higher here than when you actually open up both heads and they work together. You get a pitch drop. So CPR press that one more time. And if you were to, put your fist on it and press, you should see no wrinkles around the outside edge of the drum. If you have wrinkles, you're doing something wrong. So that seems like a pretty useful pitch there. And so now we'll flip the drum over, rinse and repeat on this side, and then we'll give it a listen when we get it done. Okay, so after you get it even on both heads, if you find that the pitch that you have is too high, just slack off a quarter turn on each one, CPR press, and then again find the low one and just bring just the lowest one up to pitch. Kind of the preferred sound of a lot of drummers is just to have the bottom head slightly snugger than the top. It leads kind of a kind of almost a wow sound. It kind of lowers it. It's kind of a descending pitch. It sounds pretty cool. And this is a little bit of a ringy sound, and if we wanted to, we could put a little bit of edge treatment or anything on here to calm it down. But at this point, we're good for this, and we'll move on to the next tom. We'll talk about how to tune toms relative to each other briefly, and then we'll move on to the snare drum. I don't want this to be a 30-minute video, and it's certainly not a product endorsement for anybody. Good drums are good drums, and as long as the shell is strong and the number of lugs on the drum, the higher the number the better, and even numbers are better than odd numbers. A lot of the budget drum sets that have been selling, particularly on the 13 and 12-inch toms, the smaller ones, instead of 6 lugs, which is kind of the minimum acceptable for that, they're dropping down to 5. And trying to get even tension on a head where you don't have even connection points is a problem. So I don't recommend that at all. I like these drums so far, and we're going to tune up the slightly smaller tom. We're going to go down to the 14, and then we'll just compare it to the 16. Okay, so 2 toms are done. These are the 2 floor toms. We're going to do a 12-inch rack tom. There is a 10-inch rack tom that exists with this set, but the new owners said, don't worry about it, we're not going to be using it, so we're not going to worry about it. But when I tune these, I try to do about a third. So in music theory class, that would be Here Comes the Bride. Here comes the bride. So roughly is where you're going for as an interval. Set your low tom to what it likes to be. Just find a good pitch for it, and then try to go up roughly that. It doesn't have to be perfect, just rough. So again, not perfect. There's still a few, there's a little bit of room to argue about that, but for the most part, we're making good progress, and we're going to work on the snare drum next. Okay, so on to the snare drum. Notice a bottom snare head is really, really thin. Okay, so don't CPR press this thing. You will go through it. I actually prefer the thinner snare drum heads just for the sound and the response, but that's just me. And make sure you're aware of where your strainer's at so you can find the appropriate rim with the slots. So when you put it down, don't goof it there. But otherwise, the mounting procedure is pretty much the same. You're going to put your head on there, make sure it's square. Put your rim on there, make sure it's square, make sure that everything's lined up. And you'll finger tighten the rods and then take them up a half a turn. And you would just give a gentle press. I just do it with a couple of fingers. And just make sure I get all the wrinkles out. Just press a little bit, look for wrinkles, turn it up. Press, look for wrinkles, turn it up. Press, look for wrinkles, turn it up. Bottom head on these, good and snug, my style. Maybe not yours, but I just like to make sure I don't have any wrinkles left. Okay, well, we're still going here on our drums. The bottom head is all done. We're working on the top head. I've got it nice and snug. Like a tom head, you get it snug and then you work your way up. Now, right now, you can hear if I hit the edges, I get a lot of overtone. You can hear the overtone. What I generally try to do is I try to keep snugging it up until the overtone in the middle starts to subside, and it gives you a great playing surface. Almost feels like plywood, old Jazz Cat stuff. So keep going on this, and then we'll check back in. And then finally, after all of that adventure, we will attach our snare wires. I have new snare wires because the old ones were fatigued. When you lay them flat on a surface, you shouldn't see any of them really sticking out. They should all kind of lay even. And this particular make comes with the cord. Some you could do straps. I actually like the cord better. But with this one, we basically put the cord through here like that. Put the cord through. If I can actually get it to stay through, that's great. I'm looking like a doofus here. So, put the cord through, And then I just usually do a little loop knot here at the end. So I'll do a little loop knot like that. And once we get the knot in there, then it's ready to attach to our strainer. There we go. There's our knot. So we'll just get this all attached up. Okay, so we're adjusted now. Basically, we're hooked on the butt plate side, and we're hooked on the strainer side. And the object is to get it pretty darn close to the center, and with your tension sort of in the middle, where you can go tighter or looser, you want to have it, you know, where you want it when it's closed. And when you open it, you want it to be off the drum. So there you go. Strainer's done, onto the bass drum. There's still one more tom-tom to do, but I think I'm just going to do that off camera. Bass drum. Okay, so onto the bass drum. Our bass drum head is a Remo Power Stroke Pro, I think they call it. Yeah, but basically it's a drum head with a piece of foam tucked on there. And actually the way they glued it and tucked it, I don't think it's going to fall off. That's the good thing, because there's way too many of these that have foam that falls off. So basically the same procedure we use with all the other drums, with one exception. So you need to drop that on there and center it up. Make sure it lays down nice. And we get our hoop. And in this case, we can tell which end we usually have the foot pedal on, because it's chewed up. So unless you feel like chewing up the rest of it, you know how it goes. Set that on there. And then we get our claws and rods and put them on finger tight. This is exactly how you do a tom-tom, just on a bigger scale. So once we get it snugged up, we'll go from there. Okay, so same business here. We've got the drum head installed. We need to CPR press it and look for wrinkles. Now, because of this rotten foam around here, rotten foam, well, it's not supposed to be rotten, it's supposed to be a good thing for dampening, but it makes it more difficult to look for the wrinkles. But effectively we're doing the same thing. We've CPR pressed it. We're going to just press down, look for wrinkles, and work to take the wrinkles out. So wherever we see wrinkles, we're going to snug that up a little bit and get that head nice and seated on there. Once it's well seated and we CPR press it into place, we may actually want to drop the pitch on it and try to get it, you know, a little bit lower. On a bass drum, we don't want to be tuned much tighter than just removing all the wrinkles. Get a nice big bass drum thump. So I'm going to CPR press, look for wrinkles, snug them up, back and forth until we get a drum that really resonates well. And we're not resonating well yet. Got a little bit more seating to do. Same deal like any other drum. Once you feel you've got the wrinkles out, you know, you check your lugs at every corner. Make sure you have about the same pitch. And it should kind of want to sing. This drum really wants to sing. I tap a corner and it really wants to sort of resonate at a low frequency. So we're going to have plenty of boom out of this head. And then we flip it over and do it again. By the way, when you're going to do the resonant head of the bass drum, or any head on the bass drum, fold your beach towel so you make sure it touches, because it's not thick enough on its own to touch because of the rim. Now, since we're using a head with a port in it this time, our CPR press, we have to be a little bit more careful, because if we lean right on there, we're going to tear it. And we don't need to press quite as hard when we're trying to remove the wrinkles. Other than that, it's pretty much like the batter head. Okay, so I have to still stretch it in, But for me, this one, when I just press, you can really see the wrinkles on it because of the color of the material. Hopefully the camera sees that well too. And basically what we're going to do is we're just going to just start bringing it up until with just the pressure of my fingers here we get all the wrinkles out. And then we're pretty much done with the Resonant Head. So the other thing I like to do is I always feel around the edge here and feel if I've got a bubble. If I feel a bubble, it kind of means it hasn't seated yet, so still working on it. Getting close. We got some wrinkles over here. Over here. That actually seems to be about it. I don't see any from where I look. All those feel snug. That actually feels just a little loose. Get that just a half a crank. See if all of these are tight or snug. That one feels a little loose. Because this hole has, or because this head has the hole, that rattling noise is just the spur. Sounds okay to me. So at this point I think we're good, with the exception of me having to wipe my handprint off. And if the drum is too resonant, then we're actually going to take our beach towel that's underneath and just roll it up and toss it inside for some extra dampening.